Hey everyone, glad you're here time. Today we're visiting neighborhoods where a mailbox color became a declaration of war.
Nothing destroys neighborly love faster than a mailbox painted the wrong shade of beige. Before we begin this suburban descent into absolute madness, subscribe to our Telegram channel, link waiting in the description below the video. That's where we post bonus, absurd stories, deleted facts, and the kind of HOA insanity that somehow didn't make YouTube safe for human brains. Now grab your lawn ruler, hide your garden gnome, and let's enter the war zone known as the American suburb. 1. The Lawn Height War. In one Florida neighborhood, an HOA board decided that grass taller than exactly 3.5 inches was basically the first sign of civilization collapsing. Not 4 inches, not kinda messy, exactly 3.5. They measured lawns like forensic investigators at a crime scene. One retired guy got fined because his grass grew too fast during a rainy weekend while he was visiting his grandkids. Imagine explaining to your family that you're racing home because your Bermuda grass is becoming a criminal organization. The best part? His next-door neighbor secretly reported him every single week. Not because he hated him, because he believed property values were under attack. That sentence alone sounds like something yelled during a cable news emergency broadcast sponsored by Lawn Fertilizer. Eventually, the homeowner retaliated in the most suburban way imaginable. He planted his grass in alternating stripes so every mow looked like Yankee Stadium. The HOA loved it until they realized the stripes technically violated uniform color consistency regulations. That's right, the grass was too professional. Only in America can your lawn accidentally become a political uprising with sprinklers. 2. The Christmas Decoration Cold War I Arizona HOA declared that Christmas decorations must be removed by January 3rd. Seems reasonable until you realize Karen from Unit 14 received a violation notice on January 4th because her inflatable snowman was still deflating, not displayed, deflating. The HOA president claimed the half-collapsed snowman created an atmosphere of seasonal negligence. That phrase sounds less like a neighborhood complaint and more like a rejected Batman villain origin story. The homeowner argued that she physically couldn't move the decoration because it weighed 200 pounds once partially collapsed. The HOA didn't care. They fined her $50 a day, while the snowman slowly melted into the earth like a festive crime scene. Things escalated when neighbors began choosing sides. Some supported the HOA's sacred anti-snowman mission. Others started intentionally leaving decorations out longer in protest. One guy kept a giant reindeer on his roof until Valentine's Day out of pure suburban spite. Soon, the entire neighborhood looked like Santa Claus lost a custody battle. And honestly, that's the most American Civil War imaginable. Not over politics. Over inflatable yard creatures and passive aggression. 3. The Great Basketball Hoop Rebellion. One suburban HOA in California decided portable basketball hoops were visual clutter, which is fascinating because nothing screams dangerous social decay quite like children playing outside instead of staring at iPads like tiny, exhausted accountants. The rule demanded all hoops be removed immediately after use. Parents complied for about 3 days before realizing moving a giant weighted basketball hoop every afternoon feels like training for the Strongman Championships sponsored by Capri Sun. One family ignored the rule entirely. Their kids kept playing basketball in the driveway while HOA board members drove by slowly like disappointed mall security guards. Eventually, the family received daily fines. Daily. Because apparently suburban peace depends on preventing 12-year-olds from practicing jump shots. Then came the rebellion. Neighbors started placing random sports equipment everywhere in protest. Soccer nets, hockey goals. One man parked a kayak in his driveway for no reason except emotional support against tyranny. The HOA retaliated with emergency meetings that lasted 4 hours. Imagine grown adults sacrificing an entire evening debating whether a Nerf hoop threatens community integrity. Meanwhile, the kids just kept playing basketball, and somehow that became the most rebellious act in the neighborhood. Not drugs, not crime, layups. That's suburban America, a place where freedom dies one driveway at a time. 4. The Mailbox Color Crisis. Most people see a mailbox and think, cool, a place for bills and pizza coupons. HOAs see it like the crown jewels of suburban civilization. In one Texas neighborhood, a homeowner painted his mailbox dark bronze instead of the HOA-approved classic colonial black. Not neon green, not camouflage, bronze. Basically, black wearing expensive sunglasses. Within 48 hours, he received an official violation letter written with the intensity of a hostage negotiation. The board claimed the unauthorized shade created visual inconsistency capable of reducing neighborhood harmony. Imagine being so emotionally fragile that a slightly shiny mailbox sends you into architectural panic. The homeowner refused to repaint it. That's when things escalated from annoying to completely insane. HOA members began photographing the mailbox daily like paparazzi stalking a celebrity trash can. One board member even measured the paint gloss level using a hardware store sample card. At that point, you're not protecting property values anymore. You're starring in a suburban FBI spin-off nobody asked for. Eventually, neighbors started painting tiny bronze objects around their homes in solidarity. Bronze flower pots, bronze bird feeders. One guy spray-painted a lawn flamingo bronze just to watch the HOA president visibly malfunction during meetings. That mailbox didn't just hold mail anymore, it held the entire neighborhood hostage. 5. The flagpole incident. One retired Marine in North Carolina thought putting up an American flag in his yard would be the least controversial decision imaginable. Wrong. The HOA informed him that his flagpole exceeded the approved height by exactly 14 inches. 14. Apparently, freedom is acceptable only if it remains under regulation measurements. The board demanded he remove the pole immediately because it disrupted the neighborhood's visual balance. That phrase sounds less like an HOA rule and more like something an evil robot says before deleting humanity. The veteran refused, naturally. Because if there's one group of people historically resistant to pointless authority, it's Marines being told their flag is aesthetically aggressive. Soon the neighborhood turned into a suburban revolution. Residents started putting flags everywhere. Tiny flags, giant flags. One guy attached so many mini American flags to his golf cart it looked like Uncle Sam opened a NASCAR team. The HOA doubled down and began issuing fines like they were printing Monopoly money. Meetings became absolute chaos. Elderly couples screamed about constitutional rights while someone's chihuahua barked nonstop in the background like a tiny patriotic alarm system. Eventually, local news crews showed up because America loves two things: freedom and watching neighbors emotionally self-destruct over landscaping regulations. The HOA finally backed down after weeks of public embarrassment. But honestly, the funniest part is that the entire war started over something shorter than a giraffe's neck. That's suburban power in America, measured entirely in inches and passive aggression. 6. The mystery of the forbidden curtains. In one Nevada HOA, residents were informed that curtains visible from the street could only be white, beige, or soft desert cream, which sounds less like a color palette and more like rejected yogurt flavors from 1994. One woman decided she'd had enough after years of living inside what looked like a dentist office waiting room. She hung bright blue curtains in her front window, not offensive curtains, not curtains with skulls or disco lights, just blue. The HOA reacted like she'd installed a working volcano on the roof. Violation notices arrived immediately. The board claimed the curtains disrupted the cohesive visual identity of the neighborhood. Translation: somebody on the board once visited a pottery barn and made it their entire personality. The homeowner refused to remove them. Then neighbors started joining her. Suddenly, colorful curtains appeared everywhere like a suburban rebellion sponsored by Bed Bath & Beyond. Yellow curtains. Green curtains. One old guy installed leopard print curtains purely out of spite and admitted he hated them every single day. The HOA panicked and scheduled emergency meetings where adults spent 3 straight hours debating curtain psychology. Meanwhile, actual crimes were happening somewhere nearby, but sure, let's deploy tactical operations against fabric. Eventually, the board compromised by allowing muted earth-inspired tones, which is HOA language for fine, but don't get creative again. Nothing terrifies suburban bureaucracy more than a homeowner discovering colors. 7. The driveway washing surveillance program. One HOA in Georgia became obsessed with driveway cleanliness after the board president returned from a vacation in Scottsdale and apparently decided concrete was now a sacred spiritual surface. Residents were ordered to pressure wash driveways every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks. Because nothing says healthy community like treating sidewalks with the intensity of military inspections. One homeowner skipped a cleaning because he was recovering from surgery. The HOA responded by sending violation photos taken from multiple angles like evidence in a true crime documentary called CSI, Cul-de-sac. The board claimed a small oil stain projected neglect. That's right, a stain on concrete was now carrying emotional symbolism. Things got even stranger when neighbors discovered HOA volunteers were driving around at sunrise specifically searching for dirty driveways. Imagine waking up at 6 a.m. fueled entirely by coffee and the desperate need to inspect pavement. That's not civic duty anymore. That's Batman if Gotham was entirely senior citizens and Labradors. Fed up, one resident painted a fake oil stain onto his driveway as protest art. The HOA fined him instantly. Another homeowner created a chalk outline around a leaf stuck near the curb with the words "driveway crime scene." Soon, the neighborhood Facebook group became the digital equivalent of a hostage negotiation. Hundreds of angry comments, terrible grammar, at least 6 minion memes. And somehow all of it existed because concrete wasn't shiny enough. 8. The bird feeder uprising. A quiet neighborhood in Ohio descended into complete suburban madness over one tiny bird feeder. The HOA declared feeders illegal because they encouraged unauthorized wildlife gatherings, which is honestly the funniest possible way to describe birds eating seeds. One elderly woman ignored the rule because feeding birds was basically her full-time hobby after retirement. Cardinals visited daily, sparrows everywhere. The HOA acted like she was secretly running an underground animal nightclub. She received multiple fines, but instead of removing the feeder, she escalated. She added another one, then another. Soon, her yard looked like a tiny avian food court sponsored by nature itself. Neighbors started supporting her rebellion. People installed feeders overnight like they were part of some feathered resistance movement. One retired guy built a bird feeder shaped like the HOA president's house, which was both petty and honestly impressive craftsmanship. The HOA tried to fight back by citing noise complaints caused by chirping. Think about that. Human adults attended formal meetings to discuss excessive bird happiness. Local reporters eventually covered the story because America cannot resist televised suburban stupidity. The elderly woman became a neighborhood legend overnight. Someone even made t-shirts saying, "Seed the birds, not the HOA." And honestly, if your greatest enemy is a grandmother with birdseed and free time, you've already lost the war. 9. The patio furniture dictatorship. One HOA in Florida became absolutely obsessed with patio furniture visibility. According to the rules, residents could only use earth-tone seating approved by the Architectural Harmony Committee. That sentence alone should qualify as evidence civilization peaked somewhere around 1987. One homeowner bought bright orange patio chairs because, and I quote, "they looked fun." Huge mistake. The HOA president reacted like the man had parked a monster truck in the living room. Violation letters appeared within days accusing the chairs of damaging community serenity. Imagine being emotionally defeated by patio furniture. The homeowner refused to remove them, mostly because he'd already spent $900 at Home Depot and was too stubborn to lose financially to people who describe beige as adventurous. Soon, neighbors began buying colorful furniture in solidarity. Blue umbrellas, red loungers. One woman installed tropical flamingo cushions that looked like a Margaritaville casino exploded. The HOA escalated by creating a 42-page acceptable color guide for outdoor decor. 42 pages. Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel with less supervision. Things got so heated that one meeting ended with 2 retirees screaming about wicker ethics while somebody's hearing aid produced non-stop feedback in the background like a dying smoke detector. And somehow, all this chaos happened because someone dared to enjoy the color orange. 10. The Halloween decoration panic. One suburban HOA in Illinois decided Halloween decorations were becoming too emotionally intense, which is fascinating because this came from people who voluntarily spend weekends measuring fences. The new rules banned fog machines, skeletons hanging from trees, and anything considered excessively spooky. One family violated the policy by placing a 6-foot skeleton on their porch holding a bowl of candy. Children loved it. The HOA acted like the Grim Reaper himself had joined the neighborhood watch. A violation notice arrived claiming the skeleton created psychological discomfort. Buddy, if fake bones are your breaking point, wait until you hear about literally all of human history. The homeowner doubled down. Every week, the skeleton appeared doing different activities: riding a lawnmower, reading HOA bylaws, sitting in a folding chair holding a sign that read, "I died waiting for approval." The neighborhood lost its mind. People drove by specifically to see what the skeleton was doing next, like it was a suburban soap opera sponsored by Costco candy packs. The HOA president demanded its removal during a heated community meeting where adults argued about skeleton posture for nearly 2 hours. Imagine explaining that sentence to your ancestors who crossed oceans and fought wars. Eventually, the skeleton disappeared on November 1st, but honestly, by then it had become the spiritual leader of the entire neighborhood. 11. The garage door surveillance operation. Some HOAs treat open garage doors like active crime scenes. One neighborhood in Colorado enforced a rule stating garages could not remain open longer than 15 minutes unless a vehicle was actively moving. Apparently, seeing a rake and a box of Christmas lights might collapse society entirely. One homeowner accidentally left his garage open while watching football inside. Big mistake. HOA board members documented the violation with time-stamped photos like they were tracking an international smuggling operation. The homeowner received a warning claiming his visible garage contents reduced the visual elegance of the community. The visible contents? A bicycle, a cooler, and one folding chair from 1996. Basically every dad garage in America. Instead of apologizing, the man turned his garage into performance art. Every time he opened it, he staged bizarre displays inside. One day, it looked like a fake archaeological dig. Another day, he arranged mannequins around a poker table. On 4th of July weekend, he recreated the moon landing using cardboard and a leaf blower. Neighbors loved it. People slowed their cars just to see the newest setup. Kids treated it like Disneyland for confused homeowners. The HOA absolutely hated it, because technically the garage was only open for exactly 15 minutes every time. That's the beauty of suburban rebellion. It's not loud, it's deeply petty and weirdly creative. 12. The Forbidden Vegetable Garden 1. HOA in California proudly advertised itself as nature-friendly, which turned out to mean decorative bushes only. A retired couple planted tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers in their front yard to save money and stay active. The HOA reacted like they'd opened an illegal casino. The board claimed vegetable gardens were visually inconsistent with luxury community standards. Apparently, tomatoes are dangerous now, somewhere a founding father just rolled over in his grave holding a shovel. The couple refused to remove the garden because it was helping them afford groceries during rising food prices. So the HOA started fining them weekly, while neighbors quietly received free vegetables over the fence like part of some underground produce cartel. Soon other residents joined in. Tiny herb gardens appeared everywhere. Basil, lettuce. One guy planted corn entirely out of spite despite admitting he hated corn. The neighborhood slowly transformed into the world's angriest farmers market. Things peaked when the HOA hired a landscaping consultant who described cucumbers as architecturally disruptive. That sentence deserves to be framed in a museum dedicated to rich people problems. Local news stations eventually covered the story because America cannot resist watching retirees defeat bureaucracy using zucchini. In the end, the HOA backed down after massive public backlash. Turns out, nothing destroys your image faster than declaring war on grandmothers with tomatoes. 13. The Great Parking Space Feud. Parking spaces in HOAs aren't parking spaces. They're sacred emotional territory wrapped in passive aggression and expired windshield stickers. One Arizona neighborhood created assigned guest parking so complicated it looks like nuclear launch instructions. Guests could only park in certain spots during certain hours, unless approved through an online portal that probably required 3 passwords and your blood type. One homeowner's son parked overnight after helping his parents during a medical emergency. The HOA had his car towed at 3 a.m. anyway. Imagine surviving adulthood only to be defeated by suburban parking goblins with clipboards. The family exploded with rage. Neighbors took sides immediately because nothing unites Americans like hating tow trucks. Soon, residents intentionally parked slightly crooked in protest. One guy left a tiny toy tow truck on the HOA president's driveway every morning for 2 straight weeks. Meetings became absolute chaos. People brought printed diagrams. Someone used a laser pointer. At one point, 2 grown adults screamed, "That's not a legal visitor space," loud enough to scare nearby birds out of trees. Eventually, the HOA relaxed the rules after local police reportedly got tired of being called over parking disputes involving golf carts and Buicks. And honestly, if your neighborhood requires flowcharts just to visit grandma, you're not living in a community anymore. You're living inside airport security with flower beds. 14. The invisible trash can crisis. Trash cans are apparently the greatest threat to suburban civilization, at least according to one HOA in Nevada that demanded all trash bins remain completely invisible from the street at all times. Not hidden, invisible. One homeowner received a violation because the corner of his trash can was visible through a gap in his fence during sunset lighting. Sunset lighting? That's not enforcement anymore. That's a vampire hunter discovering weaknesses. The homeowner became furious and responded with engineering madness. He built an elaborate wooden enclosure with hydraulic hinges, decorative plants, and motion sensor lighting just to hide 2 garbage bins. It looked less like a trash area and more like Batman stored classified weapons there. The HOA approved it immediately. That's when neighbors realized the game. Soon everyone started constructing absurd luxury trash enclosures, tiny roofs, brick pathways. One guy installed classical columns around his bins like ancient Romans' deeply respected sanitation services. The neighborhood slowly transformed into the fanciest garbage storage facility in human history. Then came the twist. The HOA announced new rules limiting decorative trash structures because they had become architecturally distracting. So after forcing people to hide garbage like nuclear waste, they got upset the hiding spots looked too expensive. That's HOA logic. A never-ending circle of complaints feeding on itself like suburban Ouroboros. 15. The backyard fire pit revolution. One HOA in Oregon banned backyard fire pits after a board member claimed smoke smell was disrupting the premium outdoor experience. That sentence sounds like somebody lost touch with reality while shopping for scented candles. Residents were furious because fire pits are basically the last remaining wholesome American activity. Sitting outside, making s'mores, pretending your backyard counts as wilderness because there's one raccoon nearby. One family ignored the ban and continued hosting Friday night gatherings around their fire pit. Neighbors started joining them. Soon, half the subdivision was showing up with folding chairs, hot dogs, and Costco-sized marshmallow bags like a suburban resistance movement. The HOA tried issuing fines, but things backfired spectacularly. Residents began buying portable fire pits specifically because they could technically be classified as temporary heating devices. That's right. The rebellion came armed with legal loopholes and graham crackers. Then someone started a weekly event called Freedom Fires Fridays. Honestly, that sounds less like a cookout and more like a country music festival sponsored by propane companies. The HOA president reportedly called the police over unauthorized community gatherings. Imagine dialing 911 because people are roasting marshmallows too enthusiastically. Eventually, the rule collapsed under sheer public embarrassment. Because if history teaches us anything, it's this: Americans will tolerate many things. But banning backyard fire and melted chocolate is where revolution begins. 16. The birdbath height scandal. One HOA in South Carolina created official regulations for birdbath height. Not joking. According to the bylaws, decorative birdbaths could not exceed 18 inches because taller ones dominated the visual profile of front lawns. Imagine having so little chaos in your life that you begin emotionally profiling bird furniture. One homeowner accidentally violated the rule after buying a beautiful stone birdbath from a garden center. It exceeded HOA regulations by exactly 3 inches. 3. The HOA sent violation notices complete with measurements and photos like they were documenting a dangerous wildlife smuggling operation. The homeowner refused to remove it because the birds genuinely loved it. Cardinals showed up daily. Blue jays moved in like tiny, aggressive landlords. The birdbath basically became the hottest nightclub in suburban nature. Then neighbors joined the rebellion. Suddenly, oversized birdbaths appeared everywhere. One resident installed a gigantic fountain with cherubs purely out of spite. Another placed a tiny ruler next to their birdbath with a sign reading, "Measure this." HOA meetings became hysterical. Adults argued over whether sparrows preferred elevated hydration platforms, while someone coughed nonstop into the community center microphone. And honestly, once your neighborhood reaches birdbath politics, civilization may already be entering its final form. 17. The garage refrigerator ban. Some HOAs believe garage refrigerators are ugly. which is insane because the garage fridge is one of America's greatest inventions. It's where dads store suspicious freezer meat, expired soda, and exactly 14 ketchup bottles for emotional support. One HOA in Texas decided visible garage refrigerators created an industrial appearance. A homeowner was fined after a board member spotted his old fridge while the garage door briefly opened during football Sunday. That's right, a man lost suburban points because somebody glimpsed a refrigerator for 6 seconds. The homeowner retaliated beautifully. He bought an even older fridge, bright avocado green, straight out of 1974, the kind of appliance that looks like it came free with cigarettes and wood paneling. Neighbors loved it. Soon, other residents intentionally displayed bizarre garage items whenever doors opened. Vintage Coke machines, arcade cabinets. One guy positioned a taxidermy deer beside his freezer just to emotionally confuse the HOA. The board panicked and introduced garage visibility patrols, which sounds less like neighborhood management and more like a low-budget dystopian movie starring retired accountants. Then local media covered the story because nothing attracts cameras faster than Americans arguing about refrigeration rights. And honestly, if your greatest fear is accidentally seeing someone's second fridge, maybe suburban peace has become too peaceful. 18. The window AC unit civil war. In one brutally hot Florida neighborhood, a retired woman installed a small window air conditioner after her central AC died during summer heat. The HOA immediately declared the unit visually disruptive to neighborhood aesthetics. Visually disruptive. Lady, it's 102 degrees outside. At that point, aesthetics should surrender to basic survival instincts. The woman explained she couldn't afford a full HVAC replacement immediately. The HOA responded by issuing daily fines while she sat inside trying not to melt like a forgotten candle in a pickup truck. Neighbors became furious. One resident pointed out that the HOA president owned a giant inflatable hot tub shaped like a waterfall casino, but apparently a tiny AC unit was the real threat to civilization. Soon rebellion spread. People started placing portable fans in windows intentionally. One guy installed a fake cardboard AC unit just to mock the board. Another created a giant decorative frame around his unit and called it industrial farmhouse chic. The HOA scheduled emergency meetings during which grown adults debated whether visible cooling technology damaged property values. Meanwhile, everyone attending was sweating through polo shirts because the community center AC barely worked. Eventually, public outrage forced the HOA to back down because Americans can survive many things. But telling retirees in Florida they can't use air conditioning is basically declaring war against the sun itself. 19. The Great Fence Paint Disaster 1 HOA in Arizona approved only 3 official fence colors: desert sand, canyon clay, and something horrifyingly named sunset wheat, which sounds less like paint and more like artisan crackers sold at Whole Foods for $14. One homeowner accidentally painted his fence the wrong shade after trusting a tired teenager at a hardware store. The difference was barely noticeable. You needed the eyesight of a hawk raised by interior designers to even spot it. The HOA noticed immediately. Violation notices appeared within 24 hours, accusing the fence of disrupting visual continuity. That sentence belongs in a satire novel about robots running a retirement community. The homeowner argued nobody could tell the difference, so the HOA brought actual paint samples to his yard and held them against the fence during daylight inspections. Imagine peeking through your curtains and seeing adults intensely comparing beige rectangles like art historians discovering ancient treasure. Things escalated hilariously when neighbors intentionally painted tiny hidden sections of their fences slightly different shades in solidarity. Secret Rebellion beige. One resident even created a Fence Color Freedom Facebook page that somehow gained thousands of followers because Americans love unnecessary drama involving paint. Eventually, the HOA quietly dropped the fines after realizing the controversy made the neighborhood sound completely insane online, which, to be fair, it absolutely was. 20. The sidewalk chalk emergency. A family in Utah let their kids draw with sidewalk chalk outside their house. Harmless, right? Sunshine, stick figures, badly drawn dinosaurs, classic American childhood stuff. The HOA disagreed. A violation letter claimed the chalk art created unauthorized visual clutter and damaged the neighborhood's clean exterior presentation. Buddy, if rainbow chalk drawings threaten your emotional stability, you were never prepared for reality in the first place. The parents laughed at first. Then they received actual fines. For washable chalk, the same substance erased by one mildly motivated rain cloud. That's when the entire neighborhood snapped. Families started organizing chalk protests every weekend. Sidewalks exploded with giant cartoons, patriotic drawings, and sarcastic messages like, "Warning, extreme happiness ahead." One retired grandfather drew a massive Monopoly board across the street where "Go to jail" was replaced with "Attend HOA meeting." Honestly, museum-worthy work. The HOA tried sending cleanup notices, but rainstorms kept erasing the evidence faster than bureaucracy could react. Nature itself basically sided with the children. Local news crews eventually arrived because nothing screams American suburb quite like adults declaring war on washable dinosaur art. And somehow the HOA still couldn't understand why everyone hated them, which may be the funniest part of all. 21. The porch-sitting controversy. One HOA in Georgia decided residents were spending excessive recreational time on front porches. Let that sentence sink in slowly like expired pudding. Apparently, too much porch-sitting created an undesirable loitering atmosphere. Imagine criminalizing the exact activity every American grandparent perfected during the 1970s while drinking iced tea and judging passing cars. One retired couple received warnings because they sat outside every evening waving at neighbors and discussing birds, weather, and whether gas station coffee has gotten worse since 1998. The HOA considered this suspiciously social behavior. Naturally, the neighborhood responded with chaos. Soon, residents intentionally sat on porches for hours in protest. Lawn chairs appeared everywhere. One guy brought out a full recliner and watched baseball games outside like he was defending constitutional freedoms through aggressive relaxation. Another family installed a tiny bell and rang it every time an HOA board member drove by. Meetings became incredible. Board members argued porch-sitting reduced community sophistication, while 50 angry retirees stared at them like a mob armed with Werther's Originals and folding chairs. Eventually, the HOA quietly abandoned the rule after realizing they had accidentally united the entire neighborhood against them. Because America may disagree on politics, taxes, and pineapple pizza, but nobody, and I mean nobody, tells retirees they can't sit on a porch. 22. The mystery of the illegal hammock. One HOA in California declared hammocks non-permanent leisure structures inconsistent with upscale neighborhood presentation, which is honestly the most exhausting sentence ever written about napping. A homeowner installed a simple hammock between two trees so he could relax after work. That's it. No loud music, no parties, just one middle-aged guy trying to become horizontal in peace. The HOA treated this hammock like it was a pirate ship docked in the front yard. Violation letters arrived claiming the hammock encouraged visible inactivity. Think about that. A homeowners association literally became angry because a man appeared too relaxed. The homeowner responded beautifully. He started using the hammock every single evening while drinking lemonade and waving politely at HOA board members. Neighbors began joining him in solidarity. Soon, portable hammocks appeared everywhere, like some kind of sleepy suburban uprising. One guy even hosted a hammock freedom festival, which sounds less like a protest and more like Jimmy Buffett's final dream before retirement. The HOA panicked and tried rewriting the bylaws to classify hammocks as temporary fabric violations. But by then, local reporters had already arrived, because America cannot resist a story where adults wage psychological warfare against lawn furniture. And honestly, if your enemy is relaxation itself, you've officially become the villain in your own neighborhood. 23. The unauthorized wind chime disaster. One woman in Oregon installed delicate wind chimes on her porch because she thought they sounded peaceful. Tiny mistake. According to the HOA, the chimes created unscheduled ambient noise events. That phrase sounds less like suburban rules and more like NASA describing alien contact. The HOA president claimed the soft ringing disrupted neighborhood tranquility, which is ironic because nothing destroys tranquility faster than somebody obsessively monitoring decorative bells. The homeowner refused to remove them. So naturally, the HOA escalated into full suburban madness. Noise complaints, fine notices, Emergency meetings where grown adults debated the emotional impact of tiny metal tubes hitting each other in the breeze. Then the neighbors joined the war. Suddenly wind chimes appeared everywhere. Bamboo chimes, glass chimes. One retired engineer installed massive industrial chimes that sounded like a haunted cathedral every time the wind reached 4 miles per hour. The neighborhood transformed into an accidental orchestra sponsored by Home Goods. One resident even synchronized multiple chimes to play fragments of patriotic songs during storms. Honestly, incredible commitment to chaos. The HOA completely lost control because technically no single chime violated the decibel rules. Together, however, the subdivision sounded like a spiritual retreat colliding with a shipyard. Eventually, the board surrendered. Because once Americans weaponize porch decorations, there's really no peaceful way back. 24. The Great Garden Gnome. Panic garden gnomes are apparently deeply threatening to some HOAs. One Florida neighborhood banned them entirely because they were considered visually whimsical beyond community standards. Visually whimsical. That's not a real sentence. That's what happens when retired accountants gain legislative power. One homeowner owned exactly one small gnome holding a fishing pole. Harmless little guy. The HOA demanded its removal immediately. The homeowner refused because, in his words, the gnome had been here longer than the HOA president. That line alone deserves a standing ovation. Soon, neighbors began secretly placing gnomes around the neighborhood at night like tiny ceramic freedom fighters. Gnomes appeared in flower beds, bushes. One showed up wearing sunglasses beside the community pool. The HOA board completely unraveled. They held emergency patrols searching for unauthorized decorative statues like suburban park rangers hunting mythical creatures. Then things escalated beautifully. Someone placed dozens of miniature gnomes all around the HOA president's lawn overnight. Tiny army, tiny rebellion, tiny ceramic psychological warfare. Residents drove slowly past the house taking photos like tourists visiting a national monument to pettiness. The HOA eventually abandoned enforcement because removing one gnome only caused 3 more to appear somewhere else. At that point, the neighborhood wasn't being run by the HOA anymore. It was being occupied by gnomes. 25. The Holiday Wreath Showdown. One HOA in Nevada approved Christmas wreaths only during a designated seasonal window from December 1st through December 26th. Apparently, joy expires immediately after dinner leftovers. One woman accidentally left her wreath up until January 2nd because she was visiting family. Upon returning home, she discovered 3 violation notices taped to her door like she'd committed organized crime with pine needles. The HOA claimed the wreath created seasonal confusion. Buddy, nobody's walking past a wreath in January screaming, "Wait, is it Christmas again?" The homeowner became furious and responded with pure suburban genius. She began decorating wreaths for every single holiday imaginable. Valentine's wreath, Easter wreath, 4th of July wreath covered in tiny flags and enough glitter to blind aircraft. Neighbors loved it. Soon wreath culture exploded across the subdivision. Halloween wreaths, football wreaths. One guy made a tax season wreath entirely from shredded receipts and expired coupons. The HOA couldn't stop it because technically the bylaws only restricted Christmas decor timing. Meetings became unbelievable. Adults passionately debated whether patriotic wreaths counted as seasonal emotional displays, while somebody loudly unwrapped hard candy in the background. Eventually, the board quietly rewrote the rules to allow year-round wreaths because the alternative was apparently endless decorative warfare. And honestly, no one should lose a legal battle to fake flowers and ribbon. 26. The Backyard Clothesline Rebellion. One HOA in Arizona banned outdoor clotheslines because drying laundry naturally was considered economically distressed behavior. Imagine being so committed to fake luxury that sunshine itself becomes unacceptable. One elderly woman ignored the rule because she'd been hanging clothes outside since the Eisenhower administration and wasn't about to let a clipboard committee stop her now. The HOA fined her repeatedly. She kept hanging laundry anyway. Sheets, towels, giant floral blankets that flapped dramatically in the desert wind like rebellion flags from the world's angriest laundromat. Neighbors became inspired. Soon, clotheslines appeared everywhere overnight. One family intentionally hung ridiculous items outside just to mock the HOA superhero underwear, leopard print bathrobes, a pair of pants so enormous they looked like circus equipment. The HOA panicked because the entire subdivision suddenly resembled a 1950s sitcom filmed during a hurricane. Then environmental activists got involved, pointing out that clotheslines save electricity and reduce energy waste, which meant the HOA accidentally positioned itself against both grandmothers and environmentalism simultaneously. Incredible strategic failure. Local reporters covered the story relentlessly because nothing says America quite like suburban warfare over damp towels. Eventually, the HOA backed down completely because history has proven many times that you should never underestimate elderly women powered entirely by sunshine and stubbornness. 27. The final war over. Folding chairs. And finally, the HOA battle that may represent peak suburban insanity. One neighborhood in Texas banned folding chairs in front yards because they were deemed temporary visual clutter. Not broken appliances, not abandoned cars, folding chairs, the official furniture of backyard barbecues, little league games, and every dad who's ever watched fireworks from a driveway. One resident got fined after leaving 2 folding chairs outside overnight following a family cookout. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it became suburban World War III. The homeowner retaliated by placing exactly 1 folding chair in his yard every single day. Different chair each time: lawn chair, camping chair, tiny fishing stool. One day he displayed a golden folding chair like it belonged in a museum honoring pettiness. Neighbors joined immediately. Soon entire front yards featured decorative chair displays like a bizarre outdoor IKEA revolution. One guy arranged 40 folding chairs in a perfect circle facing the HOA president's house like some kind of suburban summoning ritual. Meetings became complete chaos. Residents brought folding chairs into the conference room specifically to protest the folding chair ban. At one point, somebody allegedly stood on a chair and shouted, "This is what freedom sits on." Honestly, beautiful. The HOA eventually surrendered after national media picked up the story because apparently nothing captures America better than adults emotionally collapsing over portable seating. And that's the true spirit of the suburbs, a place where absolutely anything, lawns, wreaths, bird baths, or folding chairs, can become the hill people choose to emotionally die on. Which HOA rule was the dumbest? Tell me your favorite suburban disaster below.